European art cinema is a term that encompasses a variety of art film movements across Europe in the 20th century. Unlike films produced in the mainstream Hollywood style, European art cinema was far more introspective and would often tell stories that were centered on the lives of ordinary people, reflecting their experiences and cultural context.
Elle est chouette, hein?
Club des Lions.
È una buona squadra il Modena.
These films often experimented with different visual techniques, and their narrative structure would sometimes be unconventional and lack a definitive conclusion. They would feature nuanced characters and themes, often touching upon sensitive social or political issues in an effort to get at underlying truths. The directors of these films had their own vision for how films should be made and sought to challenge the mainstream cinema conventions. Italian Neo-Realism was a distinctive style of European cinema that emerged from the ashes of World War II in post-fascist Italy and is tightly linked to the period of the 40s and early 50s. After the end of the war, American occupation in Italy facilitated the dramatic influx of glossy Hollywood pictures into the Italian market. The Italian Neo-Realism movement was an effort to counter this and restore a voice to Italian filmmakers. Neorealist films were made on the streets, with little to no equipment or funding, often using non-professional actors, and were typically visually restrained. They told humble stories of the everyday man in an honest and authentic way. They avoided overt propaganda, and instead were simply uncompromising in their realistic depiction of the harshness of working-class life in Italy at the time. This approach became a powerful tool in compelling awareness. The essence of the Neorealist movement can be summed up by the sentiments of one of its primary film directors, Roberto Rossellini, who once said, "I do not want to make beautiful films, I want to make useful films." One of the most celebrated and impactful Neorealist films was Vittorio De Sica's 1948 Ladri di Biciclette, in English, Bicycle Thieves. It tells the simple story of Antonio, a working-class man who must recover his stolen bicycle or lose his job.
La bicicletta. Parliamoci chiaro, ce l'hai o non ce l'hai sta bicicletta? Se non ce l'hai bisogna dare posto a un altro.
We follow Antonio and his son Bruno as they search the streets of Rome for the thief and the bike. Shot in the streets of Rome, it made use of the dilapidated state of the city at the time to emphasize the plight of the citizens. The lead roles were portrayed by inexperienced actors. The desperate worker Antonio was played by a factory worker, his son Bruno by a kid found in the street, and his wife Maria by a journalist. We see people struggle and political commentary.
Il sussidio umilia il lavoratore, se consuma in un momento e lascia il tempo che trova.
The harshness of life.
Perché se ce lasci fare che passa l'ispettore, se ne accorge te mette la multa.
And are indulged in long shots where we can experience the film with the characters. In his plight, Antonio is frustrated at every turn. And whenever the film offers him some hope, it is quickly crushed by reality. In this scene, we see some of the hallmarks of Neorealism. Long shots that let us indulge in the characters. The subtle presence of discrimination.
Beh, allora voglio mangiare. Magna? E che non magna. Cosa vuole?
A child drinking wine.
Se te vedesse tua madre che te faccio bere.
Quipping about death.
Meno che la morte.
After acting indifferently towards Bruno for most of the film, Antonio then has a wake-up call when he thinks Bruno has drowned. However, Bruno is fine, and the overwhelming relief gives Antonio a brief respite from worrying about the bicycle. We are treated to a heartwarming moment of bonding between father and son. In another type of film, Antonio realizing his son is more important than the bicycle might have been the conclusion to his character arc and the happy ending we need for catharsis. But in the real world, life goes on after happily ever after. And soon Antonio is reminded about what he will lose if he doesn't find the bike.
12 12.000 di fisso. Io non ci voglio rinunciare.
while the young Bruno remains childlike and optimistic.
Bisogna andare a porta voltesse tutti i giorni.
The weathered Antonio is far more cynical.
E quelli non si fanno vedere più là.
Here's another scene where, against all odds, Antonio finds the thief, Alfredo. The chase begins with 2 silent long shots. We learn Alfredo was out of work too and lives in extreme poverty,
Invece di venire a offendere, date in posta a quel poveraccio che tanto
and
tempo
those in
che cerca di
authority
lavorare.
are unable to help Antonio.
Fatto trovi la refurtiva, se no non c'è niente.
The commotion that forms around Antonio is chaotic and impulsive, just like a real mob. Everyone is giving their opinions. Mothers are yelling from windows, others are throwing water from them. As the tensions rise, so does our passion for Antonio to get justice. But after all his struggles, he must accept that his bike is now beyond his reach. In desperation, he tries to steal a bike, but fails. In doing so in front of Bruno, he loses something far more precious than the bicycle. In stressing realism, the film earns our trust that it is speaking the truth. We feel like something similar could happen to us, tomorrow. This endears us to Antonio. Every time he is frustrated, we recoil with him in protest to the unfairness of fate. Since the beginning of the film, we have wanted the bicycle thief to be brought to justice. But now, by the end, we find ourselves on the brink of willing Antonio to commit the very same act to end his torment. This is the power of Neorealism film, to examine the human condition and create sympathy in the audience for what they otherwise might not understand.